This story is about a black engineer named Malik Patterson who was harassed by police while simply trying to relax by his community pool. What unfolded next exposed a deeper rot within his neighborhood's HOA1 that had quietly marked certain residents as unwanted. Through his sister's quiet bravery and his own refusal to be erased, Malik begins a journey that challenges not just assumptions, but the system that sustains them. It was supposed to be a quiet Sunday. Malik Patterson slipped into his flip-flops, filled his metal thermos with cold rooibos tea, grabbed his old copy of The Fire Next Time, and took the familiar walk from his townhouse to the community pool. The Georgia sun was heavy, but forgiving that morning. The hedges were trimmed, the sidewalks freshly swept, and the "No Loud Music" sign hung crooked as always beside the rusted gate. This was his ritual. No headphones, no phone calls, no expectations. Just him, the book, and a brief hour where he didn't have to perform produce or prove. He chose a chair near the deep end, the one half shaded by the sycamore tree. It was still early. The only sound was the occasional chirp from a cicada and the subtle glug of the pool's filtration system. Malik leaned back, opened to the page he'd folded last week, and let the world quiet itself around him. 20 minutes passed. Then, the sound of tires on gravel. Slow, intentional. He looked up. A black and white patrol SUV crept along the pool fence. It paused, reversed, then stopped altogether. 2 officers stepped out. They didn't look rushed. They looked expectant. One tall, lean, with sunglasses he didn't need. The other shorter, pale, angular jaw. Their energy wasn't hostile yet, but it carried that casual authority that assumed it belonged. "Afternoon," said the tall one, hand resting on his belt. "Mind telling us what you're doing here?" Malik blinked once. "I live here, just enjoying the pool." "Can we see some ID?" the shorter one asked, tone clipped. His badge read, "Rhodes." Malik nodded slowly. He reached into his canvas tote, keeping his movements deliberate. "Sure. I've got my driver's license and my keycard." He handed them both over. "Is there a problem?" "We got a call," said the taller one. "Someone reported a suspicious person hanging around the pool area." Malik's jaw clenched slightly. "Suspicious? How?" The officers didn't answer directly. Officer Rhodes examined the keycard like it was counterfeit. "You said you live here?" Rhodes asked. "Which unit? 412B. Malik replied calmly. "Bought it in March. I can show you the deed if we walk back." Rhodes smirked. "Huh. Not the typical profile for that unit." And there it was. Polite words, sharp edge, wrapped in plausible deniability. Malik inhaled slowly through his nose. "Look, officers, I'm not trying to make anything difficult. I'm just reading." The taller one, Officer Caldwell, jotted something in a small notepad. "Got any guests? Anyone else supposed to be meeting you here?" "No. Just me." There was a silence. One of those heavy ones where you could feel what no one wanted to say. Back at his townhouse, just across the courtyard on the second floor, Aaliyah Patterson stood on her balcony frowning. Still in her scrubs, she'd come home from her night shift at the hospital just 30 minutes earlier. She hadn't even changed. Her eyes narrowed as she watched the interaction unfold. She tapped the corner of her phone, activating the feed from the security cam she had mounted on the railing. It wasn't her intention to spy, but something in her gut told her record this. Down below, Rhodes handed the ID back. "All right. Just doing our job." But they didn't leave. They lingered. Caldwell scanned the area like he was waiting for Malik to misstep. "You understand, right?" he said. "It's not about you. We just have to check when calls come in." Malik stood now, tall and composed. "I understand," he said slowly, "that someone called because they thought I didn't belong." No answer. A woman with a golden retriever passed the pool gate. No one stopped her. No ID checked. Malik turned back to them, measured and calm. "Did the caller say what I was doing that made them uncomfortable?" Caldwell scratched the back of his neck. "They just said there was a man by the pool. Didn't recognize him. No mention of threats. No shouting. No disturbance, none." Malik nodded once. Then I'm just a guy. Reading. And drinking tea. Rhodes clicked his pen. Sir, we don't make the calls. We just respond. I get that, Malik said. But I also live here. I've paid HOA dues for 5 months. I walk my dog. I follow every posted rule. So if just sitting by the pool is enough for someone to call the police on me, what can I do? The air shifted. Rhodes stepped in slightly. Too close. You don't need to get defensive. I'm not, Malik said, not moving. I'm being honest. Caldwell interrupted quickly. Let's not escalate. Can you confirm, do you live alone? I live with my sister. She works nights. She's asleep. No guests. No noise. No issues. Rhodes scribbled something down. Then he looked up. Can you take us to the unit? Malik blinked. Right now, if you don't mind. He did mind. From above, Aaliyah leaned over the balcony, lips, tight arms crossed. The camera kept recording. I'm not comfortable with that, Malik said. I've done nothing wrong. Rhodes tilted his head. Then, how do we know you really live there? Malik didn't flinch. Because my name matches the address. Because I showed you a valid card. Because I know how many damn parking spots come with that unit. Caldwell shifted. You seem like a reasonable guy. We're not accusing you of anything. But you are, Malik said. You just won't say it out loud. That stuck. But before either officer could reply, a voice rang out from above. He lives there. Everyone turned. Aaliyah was now fully visible, arms on the rail. Her voice didn't waver. He's my brother, Malik Patterson, Unit 412B. He's been here longer than half the board. Caldwell looked up. Ma'am, please stay on your property. I am on my property, she snapped. And I'm recording this. Because we all know how these things end. Malik turned, gave her a soft nod. Something shifted. The energy, the posture, the certainty. Caldwell cleared his throat. All right, Mr. Patterson. I think we're good here. Appreciate your cooperation. They turned back to the SUV, lingering a few seconds longer, then finally drove off. Malik didn't move, didn't read, didn't sip. He just sat there, eyes open, breathing slow, not relaxed, not anymore. Because the moment had passed, but the story hadn't. And he knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Malik didn't go back to his book. He tried. Flipped to the page where Baldwin's words had once stirred something in him. But now the letters blurred, meaningless. His hands were steady, but everything inside him wasn't. He sat there in the same lounge chair for another 10 minutes, body still, mind anything but. Then he picked up his thermos, his book, and walked back to 412B, without looking at anyone. Inside, the air conditioning hummed like nothing had happened. He placed the book on the kitchen counter, poured out the remaining tea, and stared at the sink. A small crack in the tile near the faucet caught his eye. He'd been meaning to fix that. But now, it seemed so distant, like something that belonged to someone else's life. Behind him, the front door opened gently. Aaliyah stood in the doorway, still in her navy scrubs, a tote bag slung over her shoulder, eyes heavy from the night shift. She didn't speak, just dropped her bag onto the bench by the door, walked straight to the fridge, grabbed a bottle of water, and leaned against the counter. You good? She finally asked, her voice rough. Malik nodded without meaning it. You shouldn't have stepped in. She raised an eyebrow. You're welcome. No, I mean, you shouldn't have had to. Aaliyah took a sip of water, eyes not leaving his. But I did. And you know why. They both stood in that silence for a while. A long while. Then Malik asked quietly, You still have the footage? She nodded. Camera caught everything from the balcony. I've already backed it up. 3 places. He chuckled dryly. You always over-prepare. Not always. But I don't like being helpless. Malik sank into a chair at the dining table. It shouldn't take video for me to exist without suspicion. Aaliyah sat across from him, rubbed her eyes. It shouldn't. But it does. He looked up at her brows, slightly furrowed. Did you see their faces? They didn't care what I showed them. They wanted a reason. I know, she said. That's why I'm not deleting it. Malik glanced toward the sliding glass door. The pool area was empty now. Quiet. Serene even. Like nothing had just happened. He hated that. They made me feel like a trespasser in my own home, he muttered. Aaliyah's jaw tightened. You think I don't know that feeling? The way patients flinch when I walk in with a chart. The way security glances at my badge twice before letting me back into the ER after break. She paused. At least you're alive. That landed like a slap, and she knew it, but she didn't apologize. Later that evening, Aaliyah sat on the edge of her bed, phone in hand. She was re-watching the footage. She'd trimmed it, already adjusted the lighting slightly, and cleaned the audio. She wasn't a pro, but she knew how to make something presentable. It was all instinct, survival instinct. A text pinged. Jules' nurse manager. Hey, word going around you posted something online about the complex. Just be careful. You've got a good thing here. Aaliyah stared at the message. She hadn't posted anything, but someone must have seen her record it, or worse, reported her. She tossed the phone on the bed and stood up. 20 minutes later, an email came through. Subject notice of internal review. Hospital Code of Conduct. Her chest tightened as she read the message. The administration was evaluating the social media activities of staff members in relation to community conduct expectations. No names mentioned, no specifics, but she knew. They were coming for her too. Malik knocked softly on her door. You okay? She hesitated, then opened it. The hospital's investigating me. His expression didn't change. Just settled, like he'd expected it. I didn't even post the video, she added. All I did was film. That's enough, Malik said. To make them nervous. She crossed her arms, voice dropping. You ever wonder if being quiet would have just kept things easier? Malik didn't answer right away. Then he looked at her. Really looked. I wonder that every day. And still, silence never saved us. Aaliyah leaned her head against the doorframe. I'm scared, Mal. Not just for me. For you. He stepped back, nodded slowly. So am I. But neither of them said what they were truly thinking. That maybe the real threat wasn't the cops or the complaints. It was what would happen when the people who smiled at you in daylight realized you had the audacity to document the truth. That night, someone slipped a note under their door. Just a folded half sheet of printer paper. No envelope. It read, Don't start what you can't finish. This place runs on peace. Aaliyah picked it up first, held it with gloves, bagged it like evidence. Malik said nothing, but in his chest something shifted. Not fear, not rage. Something colder, something focused. Because now it was clear this wasn't just about a man at the pool. This was about who got to define peace, and who had to earn the right to sit quietly in it. Malik didn't sleep that night. Not from fear. Not exactly. It was something else, a strange electric tension humming beneath his skin. Like every cell in his body had grown hyper-aware. A low and steady alertness, the kind that only builds when someone tells you politely to disappear. He sat at the kitchen table well past midnight, the anonymous note still resting beside his laptop. He didn't touch it again. He didn't need to. The message had already burned itself into the back of his mind. Don't start what you can't finish. Next to it, his laptop screen glowed with folder names, HOA emails, trash bin notices, pool incident keycard entry logs. Each one held pieces. Nothing damning on its own, just fragments. Miscommunications, warnings, strange glances, forgotten greetings. All the things that never made headlines but stacked together formed a pattern impossible to ignore. Malik clicked open the HOA correspondence again. Read the same email for the fourth time. Please remember to keep noise levels respectful during weekends. Several residents have expressed concern about unfamiliar individuals lingering in shared spaces. That had come the morning after his cousin visited for coffee. She was wearing a head wrap. He hadn't replied to the email. But now he highlighted every sentence, every phrase, every euphemism. And then something else. His cursor hovered over a message he'd ignored weeks ago. It was a group email thread between HOA board members and select longtime residents forwarded to him by mistake, after he requested clarification on mailbox lock policies. At the time, he hadn't bothered opening the attachment. It was labeled Resident Concerns Internal. Now curiosity prickled. He opened it. A spreadsheet. Dozens of rows. Names. Units. Comments like, frequent gatherings. Watch for guests. Loud music. Monitor weekends. Unfamiliar behavior, security suggested. And then, in bold under Unit 412B, new owner. Monitor for pattern. Potential disruption. Malik stared at it for a long time. The spreadsheet was dated 2 weeks after he moved in. His breath left him slowly. Not like a gasp, more like surrender. They'd been watching him from the start. Across the table, Aaliyah stirred. She'd fallen asleep on the couch, arms wrapped around her knees. She hadn't even made it to her room. Malik stood, grabbed a throw blanket, and covered her shoulders gently. Then, he sat back down and opened a new folder. Pattern. He dragged the spreadsheet inside. The next morning, the mailroom was buzzing. People passed each other with polite nods and quick glances. A few avoided eye contact. Mrs. Donnelly, who usually waved when walking her dachshund, suddenly found the floor very interesting. Malik checked his mailbox. A plain white envelope, no return address. Inside a single index card with handwritten words. Ask Beatrice. She knows. He turned it over. Nothing else. Just that one sentence. Beatrice. Beatrice Santos. She lived in Unit 106A. Retired. Rarely spoke. Always wore gardening gloves even to HOA meetings. Malik had seen her around. Once she complimented Bruno, his dog, for having soulful eyes. He slipped the card into his back pocket. That afternoon, under the pretense of walking Bruno, he passed by 106A. The garden was pristine, lavender bushes trimmed, bird feeder swinging lazily. He knocked gently. A pause. Then the door opened, just a crack. Beatrice peeked out, eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. "You're the Patterson boy." He nodded. "Yes, ma'am. You got the note I did." She stepped aside. "Come in. Don't stand out there too long." The interior was dim, filled with books and faded sunlight. She gestured to a chair without offering tea. "I'm not going to ask how you know Malik began, but I saw the file. The spreadsheet." Beatrice didn't flinch. "Good. Took you long enough." He blinked. "You knew they were tracking residents." "Tracking is a nice word. Profiling is more accurate." She leaned forward. "This isn't new. My husband Elias got flagged 10 years ago for having too many barbecue guests." Malik's brow furrowed. "What happened?" He fought back, filed a complaint, threatened to go public. Her voice dipped. 2 months later, he got a noise violation. Then, a trash citation. Then, a suspension from using shared amenities. HOA said it was standard enforcement. What did he do? He stopped fighting. Beatrice's voice cracked. Started staying inside. Less light, less music, less him. A year later, he had a stroke. Malik swallowed. "I'm sorry." Beatrice nodded. "I've stayed quiet long enough. When I saw them tailing you, I recognized the pattern." "Why now?" he asked softly. "Because I'm tired. And you're the first one who hasn't folded." Malik's chest tightened. He wanted to say something noble, something comforting. But instead, he asked how many people on the board know. Beatrice looked at him, eyes dark. All of them. He left her house with more than a name. He had pages, printouts, meeting notes, a whisper network that had finally decided to speak. But now he knew what they were really up against. Not 2 officers, not one bad neighbor. A system, a network of smiles that concealed knives. As he walked back toward his unit, a thought hit him hard. What if he hadn't had a sister with a camera? What if Beatrice had stayed silent? What if next time they didn't knock, but just assumed? That night he added a new line to his journal. The pool isn't the only place they try to drown you. And under it, what happens when you learn how to swim? The next morning, the HOA sent a mass email. Emergency community meeting, Thursday 6:00 p.m. Attendance encouraged. Topic: preserving harmony in a changing neighborhood. Malik stared at the subject line. They weren't backing down. They were preparing. So was he. The email sat open on Malik's screen for almost 5 minutes before he moved. Preserving harmony in a changing neighborhood. They weren't subtle. He reread the subject line like it was a riddle with a threat buried inside. Not resolving concerns. Not addressing bias. Just preserving harmony. As if harmony was something fragile that could only exist if people like him didn't question it. He closed the laptop. He already knew what they were planning. That night, he gathered every piece of evidence he had digital and printed into a simple manila folder. He didn't print the spreadsheet. That stayed encrypted. But he printed a time-stamped log of every HOA complaint tied to his unit. 3 of them cited issues with increased activity. None gave specifics. 2 claimed unfamiliar visitors near his mailbox. 1 listed lingering presence near pool with no time or context. He added a sticky note on the inside cover pattern coincidence. Aaliyah entered the kitchen mid-morning, still in her sleepwear. She looked at the folder, then at him. "You going to the meeting?" Malik nodded. "Wouldn't miss it." "You want me there?" He hesitated, then said, "Not this one. Because it's too much. Because it's already about too much." Aaliyah nodded slowly. She understood. This wasn't just about a spreadsheet or a note under the door. This was about what happened when you dared to exist in peace, visibly unapologetically, and someone decided that was disruption. Thursday came. The clubhouse lounge smelled like old coffee and anxiety. Folding chairs had been set up in a loose circle. A spread of stale cookies sat untouched on a plastic table in the corner. People gathered in quiet clusters. Some made a point to look at Malik and nod. Others avoided him entirely. Beatrice arrived early, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and a cane she didn't need. She walked past the board with the posture of someone who knew too much to be dismissed. Inez Holloway, one of the newer board members, and the only one who had spoken to Malik kindly since the pool incident, gave him a brief, firm nod. Then came Trevor Lang, HOA president, polo shirt tucked too tight into pleated khakis, the kind of man who smiled with only the bottom half of his face. He tapped the microphone once and began, "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here on such short notice. I'll keep this brief." He never did. We've all seen the video circulating, and we understand there are concerns. But we want to reassure everyone that our community remains a place of fairness, safety, and mutual respect. Mutual respect. Malik almost laughed. Trevor continued, "We've always upheld the standards that make this place special, that keep it clean, that keep it peaceful. But peace requires participation. That's why we're here." A murmur rippled through the room. Someone near the back whispered, "Translation, stay in line." Then, unexpectedly, a hand shot up. "Beatrice." Trevor visibly hesitated. "Yes, Mrs. Santos." She stood slowly. Voice clear. "Are we going to address the fact that some residents are being watched without cause? Or that this board maintains files categorizing who is worth monitoring?" Trevor blinked. "I'm not aware of any such file." Malik stood. Calm, steady. "Then I'd be happy to show you." Gasps. Not loud, but real. He walked to the front of the room and held up the manila folder like it was a mirror. "These are complaints, all filed against me since I moved in. Not one has any evidence. Not one ever came with a conversation. Just assumptions. And you know what assumptions turn into when they're never challenged." No one answered. They turn into policy. A hush fell over the room. One of the younger residents, Jada, from Unit 305, raised her hand. "I didn't know about any of this. I'm sorry this happened to you." Malik nodded. "Thank you. But I'm not just here for an apology. I'm here because silence doesn't make things go away." Another hand. A man in a business suit. "Are you trying to sue the HOA?" Malik didn't even blink. "No. I'm trying to live in peace. without being labeled a problem. The air in the room turned thick. Eyes darted. People fidgeted. Then, from the side of the room, a new voice cut through. Low, quiet, but firm. He's not the first. Everyone turned. It was Mr. Fry, an older man with a deep Southern accent and a well-earned silence. My nephew used to live here. He left after getting 3 violation notices for things he never did. They called it enforcement. I called it what it was. Trevor looked like someone had pulled the rug out from under him. Let's stay focused. This meeting is about unity, Beatrice scoffed. Unity isn't silence. It's accountability. Malik looked around the room. Some nodded. Some didn't. But no one could pretend anymore. You can't fix what you won't name, he said, voice soft now. And I don't need you to agree with me. I just need you to stop pretending nothing's wrong. Trevor, clearly cornered, adjusted his glasses. We'll review procedures. Perhaps form a committee to examine future guidelines. A hollow promise. But it wasn't what happened next that changed the tone. It was who stood up. From the far end of the room, a middle-aged white woman, Lisa Garvey, wife of a board member, rose from her chair. I've lived here 10 years, she said. And I admit it. I've crossed the street when I saw someone I didn't recognize. I've assumed things I shouldn't have. She looked at Malik, then Beatrice, then Fry. I'm sorry. No applause. No grand gestures. But the room cracked, not broken, not healed, but opened. After the meeting, as people filed out, Malik lingered behind. He was about to leave when a man in a suit brushed past him, slipped something into his hand, a folded napkin, in barely legible pen. They're planning to vote you out in the next meeting. Not legally, but socially. They'll smear you, warn visitors, freeze you out. Be ready. No name, no signature. Malik looked around and wondered who in that room had handed him a lifeline. And why now? Malik sat in his car for nearly 20 minutes after the meeting, the folded napkin still in his hand. He hadn't unfolded it again. He didn't need to. The words had already branded themselves into his mind. They're planning to vote you out in the next meeting. Not legally, but socially. The warning wasn't a surprise. It was a confirmation. The whispers, the clipped smiles, the mailbox stares. He wasn't being paranoid. He was being warned. Again. He drove home with the radio off. The night was quiet, but his mind wasn't. He parked outside Unit 412B and sat there under the soft hum of a street lamp. The house looked like it always did. Peaceful, ordinary. But something about it felt different now, fragile, like a photograph curled at the edges. Inside, Aaliyah was waiting at the table, wearing her sweatshirt from nursing school, barefoot, cradling a cup of peppermint tea. You stayed late, she said without looking up. I got a note, Malik replied, setting the napkin down between them. She read it once. Then again. Her expression didn't change, but her shoulders did. They're trying to suffocate you slowly, she whispered. Without fingerprints. Malik nodded. They call it harmony. She shook her head and stared into her cup. You know what scares me. He looked at her. It's not them, she said. It's how many people will watch it happen and call it unfortunate. Like it's the weather. Malik didn't reply. He couldn't. The truth of her words landed too heavy. Aaliyah stood, walked to the sink, and rinsed her cup. Then she paused, turned and leaned against the counter. You know, she began, voice quieter now, when I was 10, I saw Dad cry in the garage. First and only time. He thought we were asleep. He just sat in the car, headlights off, holding a crumpled write-up from work. They said he was too assertive during a meeting. She smiled sadly. He got passed over 3 times after that, and every time he got smaller, like he was folding himself in. Malik stared at her. I remember thinking, she continued, I never want to see you like that. Never want to find you in a garage like that. A long silence filled the room. Then she added, that's why I filmed. Not because I'm brave, but because I'm scared. I don't want your story ending in some quiet apology or an obituary." Malik looked down at the napkin. "So what now?" "You do what you already started," she said. "You stay. You fight. And you document everything." The next morning, Malik called Beatrice. She answered on the first ring. "You got the napkin." "I did." "Then you know they're accelerating. Probably hoping you get tired. Or loud. Either way, they win. I'm not leaving. I didn't think you would." Later that day, he met with Fry at the small park behind the leasing office. Fry wore the same sun-bleached ball cap and brought a folder of his own year's worth of HOA bulletins, meeting notes, even a screenshot from an old neighborhood group chat warning residents about suspicious activity near his nephew's former unit. Malik added it all to the pattern folder. That night, Aaliyah came home to find him printing everything, dozens of pages, laying them out like puzzle pieces across the dining table. Dates, names, infractions, anonymous tips. Everything leading to one point: Malik didn't cause disruption. He revealed it. The next morning he posted a letter, not online, on every door in the complex, printed, simple, titled "Letter from Your Neighbor." It wasn't angry. It wasn't accusatory. It was real. It recounted the incident at the pool, the silence that followed, the meeting, the spreadsheet. It named no names. It asked no one to choose sides. It only asked one question. If this happened to me, would you have said something? He signed it. Malik Patterson, Unit 412B. That afternoon, 3 letters appeared under his own door. One was typed. Simple. "Thank you. We see you." The second was handwritten. "I didn't know. I'm sorry I didn't ask. I want to do better." The third was anonymous. All caps, sharp ink. "Enough. Move." Malik folded it neatly and pinned it to his fridge. That night, Aaliyah's phone buzzed. She was lying in bed scrolling through lab results for her patients when she saw the sender, hrnorthviewmedical.org. Subject: Notice of Administrative Review. Conclusion. She read the email twice. Her contract wouldn't be terminated, but she would be moved to an off-site overnight unit while her conduct was monitored. Her reward for speaking out. She closed the laptop and stared at the ceiling. She dialed her best friend Tanisha, a nurse in Decatur. When the call connected, her voice shook more than she expected. "They moved me. Off-site night shifts. Said it's temporary." Tanisha sighed. "I'm sorry, Aaliyah. I filmed my brother being harassed. I didn't even post it, just filmed." "You think it's punishment?" "No," Aaliyah whispered. "It's warning." There was a pause on the line. Then Tanisha said, "You want out?" Aaliyah blinked. "Of the hospital, of the neighborhood." "No," she said. "If I leave, I prove them right." "So what do you do?" Aaliyah's voice steadied. "I stay loud, even when they tell me I'm dangerous for holding up a mirror." After she hung up, she stood by the window looking down at the courtyard. It was empty. Still. The same place her brother had been questioned for sitting with a book. She pressed a hand to the glass, not to block out the world, but to hold her place in it. And just then, like the universe refused to let the night end peacefully, a second envelope slid under the front door. No name. Again. Malik picked it up. Inside was a single line. "Ask your board rep about the circle, but don't expect honesty." He turned to Aaliyah, who was already walking toward him. Their eyes met, and they both knew this wasn't about reputation anymore. It was about exposure, and someone somewhere was losing control. The next morning, Malik sat at the kitchen table, that second envelope still open in front of him. The phrase echoed in his head like a riddle. "Ask your board rep about the circle, but don't expect honesty." He'd barely slept. Aaliyah, neither. They'd both sat there in silence for nearly an hour after opening that note, saying nothing but thinking the same thing: someone on the inside was either cracking or playing games. He'd heard whispers about cliques within the HOA, before residents who seemed to know about decisions before meetings were even announced, families who always got courtesy calls instead of citations. But he'd never heard of anything called the circle. Until now. He checked his phone. It was 6:42 a.m. The sky outside still hung with that soft, dull gray before sunrise. He texted the only person he could think of who might tell him the truth. Malik, I need to talk. Today, if possible. Face to face. Discreetly. He hesitated before hitting send. To Inez Holloway. She replied in under 2 minutes. Inez, come, by 204, around 8. Don't use the front door. By the time he got there, the world had just begun to stretch awake. Mail trucks humming, sprinklers sputtering, kids still inside. Inez's unit was quiet blinds drawn. He followed her instructions and came in through the back patio, sliding the door, just enough to slip inside. She stood in the kitchen wearing a worn t-shirt, house slippers, and no makeup. A kettle steamed behind her. I figured it was just a matter of time, she said, not bothering with hello. Coffee. No thanks. She poured herself a cup, then motioned to the stool at her counter. Malik sat. I'm going to ask once, he said. And I need the truth. Inez met his gaze without flinching. What's the circle? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stirred a sugar cube into her mug, tapped the spoon gently on the rim, and exhaled. It's not what you think, she said finally. Malik didn't move. Try me. It's not official. It's not on paper. But yes, it exists. It's an understanding among certain board members, a few residents. It started years ago after some break-ins. There was fear, and people responded the way people usually do, by protecting what they think is theirs. He frowned. By profiling Inez, nodded once. By creating internal lists, flagging residents who seemed out of sync with the community tone. And I'm one of them. You were before you ever moved in, she said. After your mortgage was approved, your name came up in a circle discussion. They flagged Unit 412B as sensitive. Not because of you personally, just based on neighborhood compatibility factors. That's the language they use. Malik sat back, cold washing down his spine. Who else is in it? I can't say all of them. But Trevor, his wife, Mrs. Donnelly, 2 board members from the North Quad, and up until a year ago, Beatrice's husband. Elias. Inez nodded. He was a founding member, regretted it later, tried to withdraw, but they isolated him. Malik exhaled sharply. That's why he stopped going out. Exactly. He paused. Is this how the system's always worked? Inez stirred her coffee again, slower now. Here, yes. And not just here. You think gated communities are about gates? No. They're about control. Gatekeeping people. Gatekeeping stories. Peace for some is just a well-maintained silence. Malik stood. I can't let this keep happening. I didn't think you would. She reached under the counter and handed him a manila envelope. Meeting minutes. From 2 years ago. The term, the circle, was accidentally documented once. They tried to scrub it, but I kept a copy. He stared at her. Why are you helping me? She looked down at her coffee. Because one day, my daughter might want to live here. And I'd rather her be judged by her gardening than her last name. Later that afternoon, Malik and Aaliyah met Beatrice in her garden. She was pulling weeds wearing gloves, her hat tilted low. Inez told you, she said without looking up. She confirmed, Malik replied. Beatrice stood and wiped her brow. I wasn't always the one handing out truth. But people change. Sometimes too late, sometimes not. Aaliyah looked around. Why did your husband join in the first place? Because he thought he was protecting something, Beatrice said. Then realized too late what he was protecting from. A pause. He got quiet, Malik. You know the kind of quiet that's dangerous. The kind that wears you out from the inside. They sat together in her backyard, the 3 of them passing a jug of lemonade between them, like it was something sacred. And then Beatrice said, I want to show you something. She led them into her garage. A dusty metal cabinet locked with a tiny padlock. She opened it and pulled out an old shoebox filled with papers, cassette tapes, and handwritten notes. Elias recorded everything she said. He never planned to use it. But he kept it all. Malik stared at the contents. This could blow the whole thing open. Beatrice smiled faintly. I hope it does. But be careful. Truth doesn't set you free. It just removes the shadows. And not everyone likes the light. That night, Malik listened to one of the tapes. It was Elias's voice. Soft. Tired. We've created a culture of suspicion and called it safety. We've buried our fear under landscaping and called it civility. And if no one stops it, the only people left here will be the ones too numb to care. Malik looked up at Aaliyah, who'd been sitting beside him the whole time. I think he wanted someone to find this, he said. She nodded. And now, someone did. Malik opened his laptop. He started drafting an anonymous memo, one that would be printed, posted, and dropped. Inside it would be one question. If safety is peace, why are you so afraid of your neighbors? But just as he was about to hit save, a new email arrived. From HOA board subject, special closed-door vote, confidential attendance required. He clicked it open. The first line read, effective next week, the HOA board will convene a private meeting to discuss behavioral concerns and possible enforcement actions against select residents. No names. But it didn't have to. Malik stood up slowly. They're moving, he said. Aaliyah folded her arms. Then, let's make sure we move faster. But Malik paused. His eyes narrowed. Because deep inside that email footer was something new. A signature block from a communications liaison he'd never seen before. Marjorie Keller, Unit 3-11. He'd never spoken to her. Never even heard the name. But someone had slipped that napkin into his hand. And someone had known about the circle. Which meant, was Marjorie the leak or the trap? Malik stared at the name on the screen, Marjorie Keller, Unit 311. It hadn't been in any of the meeting transcripts. None of the public HOA rosters. She wasn't a board member, not officially. But her title said, Communications Liaison. That alone made his pulse shift. Do you know her? Aaliyah asked from across the room, standing now, arms folded, mirroring his unease. No, Malik said. Not directly. But I've seen someone coming in and out of that unit. Mid-40s, glasses, always on her phone, never talks, not even to Bruno. That was all he needed to know. He opened a blank document and began typing again. Not the anonymous memo he'd started before. Something else. A real letter. Direct, unfiltered. To whom it may concern. If you're reading this, then you already know something is off. Maybe you've seen it. Maybe you've felt it. Or maybe someone like me has finally said it out loud. I'm not here to accuse. I'm here to document. To reflect what's happening in plain sight behind the hedges and under the HOA banners that promise community. This is a record, and records don't lie. Even when people do. He attached copies of the flagged spreadsheet, the recording transcripts from Elias, the old HOA notes Inez had shared. Not everything, just enough to force open the cracks. Then, at the top of the file he typed the circle, timeline, and key patterns, 412B case study. He hit save, encrypted the folder, and uploaded it to 3 cloud drives, 1 under his name, 2 under aliases. He didn't tell Aaliyah where. Not yet, but the look in her eyes said she knew. Just in case. Saturday morning arrived thick with heat and anticipation. The closed-door HOA meeting was set for 10:00 a.m., but the clubhouse parking lot was already half full by 9:15. Malik and Aaliyah didn't dress up. Just clean jeans, neutral shirts, no slogans, no signs, just presence. As they approached the doors, Beatrice appeared behind them, sunglasses on tote bag over her shoulder. She looked like a woman heading to war with potting soil. Stay close, she whispered. They hate accountability more than noise. Inside, Trevor Lang stood near the foldable tables, flanked by his usual crew, Mrs. Donnelly Garrett from Unit 108, and the woman Malik now recognized as Marjorie Keller. She glanced at him, once sharp, unreadable, and looked away. The meeting began without ceremony. Trevor adjusted the mic. Good morning. As you know, today's meeting is to address increasing division in the neighborhood, disruptions to the fabric of our community, anonymous communications, accusations. He paused for effect, looked around. We understand that not everyone agrees on how to maintain order, but order matters. A woman in the back muttered, "Define order." Trevor ignored her. As such, we are proposing a revision to Article 4B, allowing the HOA board discretion to initiate conditional behavioral reviews of any resident deemed a repeated concern. Malik's hand went up. Define concern. Trevor stared at him. We're not taking questions yet. Malik stood anyway. You want to pass a rule without defining the target silence. Beatrice clapped once. Well, Marjorie finally spoke. It's not about individuals. Malik turned to her. Is that why your name just started appearing in board footers this week? Because this has nothing to do with individuals. A ripple moved through the room. He took out his folder. Here's the thing, Malik said. I already knew what you'd try to do today. I knew because your own board members, past and present, gave me everything I needed. He began placing copies of the spreadsheet on the table. A few slid to the floor. He let them. You've been documenting residents without their knowledge, marking them based on appearance, visitors' assumptions. You created the circle and never once disclosed it to the community you claim to protect. Mrs. Donnelly stood. That's confidential board strategy. No, Beatrice said. It's shadow governance. Trevor tried to regain control. Let's take a moment. No more moments, Aaliyah said, stepping forward. You dragged my brother through a living case study in humiliation. You demoted me for filming him. And now you want to legislate your fear. Who gave him that data? Marjorie hissed suddenly. Malik raised an eyebrow. Interesting choice of question. Not, is it true? Not, are we wrong? Just who told that, told everyone exactly what they needed to know. The room turned, slowly, one by one. People who had stayed silent too long began whispering. Some stood. Others sat still, ashamed. Then Mr. Fry stepped forward with an envelope. I was on the board 5 years ago, he said. I left because I saw where this was going. I stayed quiet. That ends today. He handed the envelope to Malik. Inside was a list. Handwritten. Dated. HOA Resident Tracking Initiative. 5 of the names had already moved out. One was Elias. The last was Malik. At the bottom of the page, someone had scrawled in red ink 412B. Watch for escalation. Keep narrative clean. Malik didn't speak. He didn't have to. The truth had. The vote to revise Article 4B failed. Not by much, but it failed. Trevor resigned the following week, citing health reasons. Marjorie disappeared from board emails. No official statement was released. But the Whisper Network changed. People who once crossed the street now said hello. The dad who once recorded Malik outside the leasing office apologized twice. Fry started attending board meetings again. And on the second Sunday, after the vote, something even stranger happened. A family from Unit 216, quiet, reserved, white, invited Malik and Aaliyah over for dinner. They said they'd read the letter, and they were ashamed they hadn't seen it sooner. 2 weeks later, Malik found a small box on his doorstep. No name. Inside, a brass key, a USB stick, and a single note. Not everyone who stays silent is your enemy. Some are just waiting to see if you'll speak first. This isn't over. It's just your turn now. No signature. Just an address. Unit 311. Malik stood in the doorway of his unit, the sun dipping low over the hedges. The pool was quiet. A kid splashed. Someone laughed. For once it wasn't tense. But the story wasn't finished. It had only shifted. And as the light faded, he looked at Aaliyah and said quietly, "Let's get to work." Stories like this aren't about winning. They're about refusing to vanish. Because peace that demands your silence isn't peace, it's control. If this story made you think, made you feel, or made you remember something you've been too afraid to say, don't let it end here. Share it, speak it, and if you haven't already, subscribe. Because stories like Malik's, They don't belong to one person. They belong to all of us.